Don Mazzella here, and for many years I've heard the name Ted Oakley. Never had the pleasure, but I know from my days at S&P that he was one of the bright lights uh, of the industry, and now he's here to talk about a subject that's dear to me because we just sold our company, but a lot of people have. Worked all a long time. Finally decided well, enough's enough. Usually because their children don't want to have anything to do with it, and then they're suddenly retired with all this money. Ted Oakley, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you, Donald. Glad to be here.
Okay, um, Ted, as we always ask our guests, tell us a little bit about yourself personally, then about your company, and finally a website, and finally we'll start on this, to me, very interesting topic.
Well, Donald, I have to say I'm probably one of the most blessed people in the world. I actually grew up in the deep, deep hills of Appalachian, very, very northern Georgia, close to North Carolina. And when I lived with my grandmother, we didn't have any running water. We had an outhouse, and we had that for the first 6 years I was alive. We finally moved on up to where we had a two-room house, my parents, and they never had any money in their whole life, actually, and so they were sort of they really were out to save the world. Literally, he was a minister, so it was an interesting way to grow up, but it certainly wasn't around any money. Everything I learned about money was later on. We ended up in Greeley, Colorado, and back down to Texas. But one of the things I did know back then, and I know now, is that if you can, I have two foster child foundations. That if you can educate kids, you can get them out of the mud, you can get them out of the mire. And I got educated. I was lucky; had a lot of people help me. Like I said, I've been really blessed. Ended up started way back in the business, Merrill Lynch, actually in New York City, and ended up back. We had a private company at the time called Rotan Mosley, and we sold that company. And then I started another partnership. And then a few years later, we took those assets and put them into this company here now, which is Oxbow. And we work all over the U.S. really, about 30 states or so. So that's sort of the history of what we've done at this point.
What does Oxbow do before we go any further for our audience?
Well, we manage money, but not just money. We there's two things we really like. We manage stocks, bonds, cash, and we don't do exchange traded funds or indexes. We own companies. We own outright companies, outright bonds. Everything we own, we know, and we don't try to just plug and play or buy a line item or something. Every company we have for a reason. And then we do quite a bit of, we really like real estate. We send some people to private real estate quite a bit. Real estate is really right up there, one of the good investments for a lot of reasons. And then we work with a lot of people prior to the time they sell a company, trying to get that ready or get them with the right M&A person or something like that. So that's sort of a myriad of things we do. Personally, by the way, I'm part of a bank. I know the banking business pretty well because I've been around it for 20 years and own stock for a long time. So I know the banking business well, even though that's not my primary business.
And your website for our audience?
Our website is just oxbowadvisors.com. And when you go there, you'll see we have a lot of things we do as far as interviews we do if people interview us. There's 7 or 8 books there that really, when somebody asks us for a copy, we just give it to them. I picked that up years ago in writing from business owners. They don't like to read more than about 2 hours. And so most of our books, most of our books you can read in roughly 2 hours, 2.5 hours at most, because they'll sit there on a plane and read it and then you're done. So that's what most of them are like that.
Okay, Ted, We were talking before we got on the air, and you said, let's talk about, you suggested we talk about what happens after you sell. And to me, that's a subject close to my heart. So, with that, the floor is yours. What have you learned over the years that you can help our audience, which, by the way, is made up primarily of people with companies under 50 employees?
Well, and that's a lot of companies out there, Donald. You know, one of the things, and I've talked to thousands of business owners because uh, I've been in that area for 38 years or so. So, and one of the things I find about business owners is that, first of all, they're a fabulous group, by the way. They're the people that really make it go in the U.S. And I've always thought that you'll see any of the books I've written, they talk about that. But what happens is with the business owners, really, they're a different group of people. They did all of their work, sweat, blood, sweat, tears, everything went into the company. And they really didn't spend a ton of time, I'm saying generally now, on stocks and bonds and that sort of thing. Some real estate, yeah, in general, but they put a lot into their own companies. Here's the catch. And so you've done that for 15, 20, 30 years, whatever the number is. And then all of a sudden you get a big offer, you sell it. And one of the first things they find is that there's an emptiness. There's an emotional emptiness because let's face it, you were the boss, everybody answered to you, and there's a little bit of an ego twist to that. I know I'm the boss in some companies, so I know how that feels, but that's the first thing that happens. I remember the first book I wrote was in 1992. Let's go, You Sold Your Company. And one of the things I put in there was that, look, things are going to change and you need to really get ready for this, okay? Number one, you are not the boss anymore. And by the way, you don't own it anymore. So when that 26 or 7 or 28-year-old MBA shows up in your office and says, I'm from the mother company, and by the way, you're spending too much on pencils, you won't like it. And you know that business better than they do. I assure you, every business owner knows that business better than people that bought them. But you've sold it and you get lots of money. So there's a period, I wrote another book called Crazy Time, and it was about the first year after selling your business, because that's the time you have to make the adjustment from owning a business to your new business, which is you have a lot of money. That's where you have to make the adjustment. Some people do really well, some people not so well. And one of the things that business owners have to realize is you were really good at your business and you made a lot of money. And that's why somebody bought you, because you did a great job of building that company. But it does not qualify you to be a good investor in the financial business. Some of them think it does. They think it does, but it really doesn't. And so you have to go to a stage where they realize that, and we tell them this, take a year or 18 months, and you need to really not do anything. No, don't even do anything with your money. You need to stop and figure out how you're going to feel, what to look for, give yourself plenty of time to really acclimate. One of the things I put in one of the books was you need an office. You know, whether you're a female or male, you can drive your spouse crazy if you're there all the time. That's not the routine. They're not used to that routine. You know, they got their own routine. You need to go get an office. It can be a tiny office, but you need to go get it. And you need to get into that mode where you have a purpose in life to go to. I find people that sell these companies and they lose all purpose, they don't do well health-wise. I find some of them change purposes, and I think that's excellent. You know, you can do church, or you can do charity, you can do schools, you can do kids, you can do a lot of things. But if they have a purpose, they always do a lot better. The people that we find that don't do as well is they have a lot of money and they have nothing to do because they never had any hobbies or anything like that. And so they're lost. Are completely lost. That's one facet of it. Just making that adjustment is one thing. The second thing is and we do a lot of work on this with people, is that most entrepreneurs today, I'd say 80% or more that build a company did not have any money themselves. They bootstrapped it in the very first, the first time they started, and they were first generation all the way. They have this thing, and people, you automatically have this. You have this thing where you want, well, my children, I don't want my children to have it as hard as I had it. You know, I had it really tough. I had to work all the time. I had to work as a young person, all these things. That, Donald, could not be further from the truth. Because what you really want to do is have those children, forget about the money, have those children learn to stand on their own 2 feet, to make their own money, and to provide for themselves so that they have the self-esteem that you want in that particular child as they go forward. If they never have to have anything hard and you provide all that, what you're doing is you're producing somebody that has no confidence in themselves because daddy and mommy took care of everything. And as they go further in life, and this really shows up later on in life when they're like 50 years old, you know, they try their very best to be important and to show that they know something, do something, make terrible mistakes in investing and a lot of things. And it's because those kids try too hard. They never got a chance to be there. And so one of the things we do a lot with business owners is we try to sit down with them and say, no, you know what, you got a chance here. You just sold this company for 30, 40, 50, 100 million. You've got a chance here to make sure you do the right things with the money. Because when they walk into your office, the number one thing they're worried about outside of health for them and their spouse is their children. Easily the number one. And so we spend a lot of time trying to teach them and show them that I know it feels counterproductive to you. It's going to be harder on you because your children will know that you do have some money. But you need to be in a position where you can make that work really well, because if you go the wrong direction, you take all this money and you just start providing for these kids, you look up all of a sudden, and for lack of a better word, they're pretty worthless. And so by the way, I've seen I've seen really big deals where they did it perfectly with their children. I mean, their kids are all successful on their own. They didn't need the parents' money. They'll get it someday. But those are the ones I like to see. But the business owners, see, they're going through about a 5 or 6 item change. And it's all the way from selling the business to trying to figure out what you want to do, to how you're going to invest. And they don't know anything about investing. They know people in the business, but they don't really understand a lot of what goes on with it, the details of it. They know all the jargon and all the terms, but they don't know the risk involved a lot of times. Then you got to deal with your children. Then you have to deal with everyone that knows you will all of a sudden become your better friend than they were because, I've got a deal for you, and you'll get more people off you, more deals than you can ever imagine. And, there's been books written about this, about how you when you get a lot of money from selling a company, you sort of go into another country, into another land, because your friends who don't have a lot of money, and I can truly say I have friends up and down the spectrum, but they don't know, they feel different then. And you have to be careful about showing that as well. I mean, that's a segment we go through with people too, to say, hey, this is just a thought for you here, something to do. And so it takes really for most business owners, it takes them about 3 to 5 years to really acclimate to what they are and what they're going to be doing, not only with their money, but what they're going to be doing with their family. They've got some guilt to it, Donald. You had 10, 15, 20 employees. You love them. You basically raised them. And in one of my books, like I say, in Crazy Time, I mentioned, look, it'll be okay. Every company out there basically has been either made to sell or will sell. So don't get too hung up on that, because that's just the way the world is. But so that's sort of how the spectrum we run. One of the things we can get into money management, but for business owners, they probably, unless they're really unusual, they're not going to get another chance at making that really big hit. You know, they'll make hit. Oh, they'll invest in some things and make some money. But so when people manage money for them, they have to remember that hey, this is your deal here, and it's got to last a long time. And you need to make sure that preservation of capital is tops and growth is second. And you know, you can spread. You can do private business, real estate, a lot of good things, but I think too many times they just show up on Wall Street and say, well, show me what you have. So, you know, we'll invest in 15 areas and you're going to be okay. Well, that's not enough, really. You know, you need to think about it. So that's sort of the wide spectrum of what we do. I'm sorry it takes so long, by the way.
No, I didn't think it was long enough, but that's okay. Um, Ted, I want to go back. You've raised several very important points. The first one, on our program, we have entrepreneurs come on, and they talk about this being their third, fourth, or even fifth company. But it seems to me we're divided between the young people who turn companies out based on IT, and the older companies, people who who develop companies based on brass fittings or etc. Is that somewhat of a divide?
Donald, you are very observant. Most people don't know that. I mean, that is exactly what happens. If you look at uh, most business owners that sell a company, there's a lot of merger acquisition goes on. I'm sitting here in Austin, Texas, so obviously we have a lot of tech. But we do a lot of work in California too, and the East Coast. So we see that a lot. But exactly, the people, most of the businesses for these people that are under even 40, let's say, have some tie to IT. There's some kind of tech some way or another, either online or they're providing a service where you can buy quickly, that sort of thing. And when you find much more of industrial material kind of, you know, hard items, that's for the people we find selling that are 65, 70, 75. You're exactly right. There's a split between the two. And there is one other thing. Most of the time when they sell a business under 35, we make the assumption that they're going to try to do another business. They may do two or three for all I know. And one of the things I found too is that some of those lose all of their money. Not all of them, not a lot of them, but some of them, it came so early for them that they didn't actually appreciate the fact that this is hard to put together $20 million. So let's go do it again. And then they lose it. You find, but I find by the time they've done their second or third company, they're really seasoned. And let's face it, that's what they love to do. You know, if you look at most people that own a business, they love that game. And if they weren't 70 or 75, they'd probably do it again, you know. But they have a big interest in it. But you got it exactly on the money. There's a split right down the middle between what people do now. They're selling companies.
Well, let me build on that for a moment. But it also seems that the people we talk to in the older generation, their children don't want the business that their parents have developed, because they don't want the 24/7 commitment. They don't want the things that go along with being an entrepreneur. Do you find that to be the case? And what we've seen in the people that sell the business, they don't really want to sell it. They wanted their children, and they're really disappointed their children haven't followed.
That is so true, Donald. What happens is there's a lot of business owners out there today that they're disappointed that their children didn't want to take over the business. And I think you have a good point in that you know, when you're running a business, and I tell everybody this, if you're the president of a company, you're the number one salesman, number one. You're the number one back office person, number two, and number three, you're the owner. And so they don't realize that you're everything. And so once they see that, that's like too much. Where I go start, say, an online company, that all I have to do is put together a little bit of a business plan, and then I ship it out there, and all of a sudden I start getting recurring revenue. No building, no insurance, very few employees. And so that's sort of what you're up against. I do think a lot of young people, though, pass up a really good opportunity for that because they don't realize how hard it was to build that business. And I might say this to you too. I think a lot of young people get a bad rap. I actually run into an intern, some great young people. We intern probably half a dozen every year, that they're the best. You can't get any better. I've got young people in my companies that are they're as good as I was or you or anybody else ever was. They'll work hard, they'll spend the hours. So it's not the whole group really. I think you can pick and choose, but I think what's hard for a business owner is they can't just go out and get somebody. But that's a big thing. And there's a lot of business today are still owned by people that are over 65 or 70.
Only because they don't know what to do with it.
That's true. And there's a friend of mine in the merger acquisition business, and he's written a couple of books about merging, selling your company too. And he says that he calls it the rule of 72, not what you and I know about doubling your money, but the rule of 72 to him is if you're 72 years old and you still have your company, you're probably never going to sell it.
That's probably true. But let me ask you another question. First off, Ted, we're talking with Ted Oakley. Your website again for people and how they can reach you?
You can reach us at oxbowadvisors.com. There's phone numbers there. There's all kinds of ways to get in touch with us. And I think what you'd find there is we have a lot of great info about markets. We put everything we do on that website. We put our market letters, we put our opinions, all the books are on there. So, I think you'd find it interesting to see.
Well, well, definitely. But can we, it's funny you should add, we had an entrepreneur on a couple of days ago that said that he really, again, he had raised from poverty, but the toughest thing he and his wife had to do was raise their children, because how do you instill on them the ethic of hard work, etc. And it's funny, in the very next broadcast, you bring it up. Do you think we have not done a good enough job overall in getting our young people to work hard?
Well, yes, I think there's a degree of that. I think part of that, particularly with entrepreneurs, though, I wrote a book. One of the books I wrote, Donald, was entitled "Rich Kids, Broke Kids," and what I say in there is the number one that you can do for a child is make them work. My children, when they were 12 years old, I took cash down to people I knew in various businesses because of insurance and various things. They couldn't hire them. And I gave them cash to pay them to work all summer. And I mean hard jobs. And they learned to work all the way through. Could I send them to, football camp or just go out and have a good time or lay around and sleep every day? Yeah, I could have done that. But that wasn't what needed to be done. And what I find with people that sell these companies is they did have it hard as a person, I'm sure, growing up. That this is one of the sort of the catch-22s of this whole thing, and that is that they feel like, I had it so hard, and it was so hard to build this company, and now I've got this money. Gosh, I don't want my child to have to go through that. I don't want them to try to go through that. So what we've done, and we've done it not just in entrepreneurs, but all over the country, is we thought, I want to make it such that life will be happy for them and be good, and they can enjoy it, and they'll have plenty of money. You know what, though, Donald? That's not what life's all about. It's about running into the wall. Can you get yourself back up? We teach this a lot. I'm like I say, I have two large foster child foundations here in Texas, two of the largest really. And one of the things I do with these kids, I say, look, you got to educate, you got to get back up. And if you go out and give your children too much, you don't give them the chance to trip and fall and get back up. One of the things we've always liked about hiring, we hire over the years, as I've always said, if you hire like athletes in college, they have a resilience about them because they've been beat up before, they've lost, they've been knocked down, but they had to get back up. And I think when you do that as an entrepreneur, your children, if you don't allow them to get knocked down and have some rough times, and I'm talking about, you don't send them a check every time. You say, well, I don't know what you want to do about that, but you're going to have to go figure something out. That's a hard statement to make to your child, but you need to make it. And you'll be so happy 10 years, 15 years later when you really can give them some money, and they will really, really appreciate it then. And so that's sort of my take on that subject.
But you're also, it's really hard on you. How do you stand aside and let your child fall? I mean, isn't that, I have no children, so I can't tell you, but it seems to me that it's very hard when you see your child fall, not to rush in there to help them up.
It is. What we try to do with them is there's 3 or 4 really good books, 4 or 5 really good books have been written on this in addition to mine. I wouldn't say mine's the best by any means, but there's some good books about it. And what we try to do with people is give them a voice to talk to that's not one of the spouses. In other words, the spouses can sit around and talk to each other, and they're going to automatically default to, God, I don't want to hurt him. I can't stand to see him hurt. Well, the problem with that is, if you look at the world today, and anybody that was probably successful, they had some hurt. They had a period where, they almost got their electricity turned off, or they're behind on car payment, or something. They had a flat. Somebody's got to fix it. Well, I got to figure out how to do that. I can't call daddy and mommy and say, hey, send the wrecker over and take care of this. I don't want to fool with it. I mean, there's so many things they can do to really affect that, and they have to be able to do it. And the other thing they do not want to do, I do not agree this with financial planners and all that sort of stuff. One of the things out there is they try to say, well, you need to share early on what the wealth picture is. I don't agree with that. I think you share it. I do think you share it in time, but they better be 35 or 40 years old or older before you do it. Because they don't have the capacity, in my opinion, at least, and I'm sure a lot of people differ with me on that. I don't think they have the capacity in their teenage years, college years, or young working years to be able to think about that and not have it affect them. So you want them out in the workplace, 10 or 15 years at least before they know anything about your finance. After that, if they're doing well, I'm not saying you shouldn't talk to them about some things, but I think that's a mistake that a lot of people are doing this holistic planning are doing and saying, well, we want to make sure everybody in the room knows everything. And so they grow up having this sense of responsibility. No, they don't. There's not a 17-year-old out there. If you say, hey, my parents are worth $85 million, what kind of responsibility am I going to feel? Now, if I'm working down at McDonald's by the hour, believe me, I'll have some responsibility. So I disagree with that approach by these financial planners, but it's each to his own. But I found that works best if you can work with these people and make sure they understand that, look, there's got to be a period here, maybe 10 years, maybe 15 years. You'll be so happy you did this. So in the end, you'll be happy. They'll marry better. You won't have to worry about the in-law girl or guy that marries in thinking, you know what, there's a lot of money here and I want some of that too. So there's a lot of things that come into that. And you have to keep that in mind, when you're doing this stuff.
We're talking with Ted Oakley. Ted, one last time, your website?
Our website is oxbowadvisors.com.
Okay. Ted, we have just a few minutes left, but I'd like to ask you a question selfishly. We've just gone through a pandemic. probably one of the events that really set back nations. Do you think we as a nation can uh, come back from something like the pandemic and still be a nation like we came back from the Depression and World War II?
You know, Donald, it's an interesting you asked that. I've asked myself that question a lot of times because there's a series of about three ways you can go here, three or four ways. You could now just become more and more and more socialistic, give everybody more money, and that works okay, MMT, the whole thing. You could become totalitarian, you could come a totalitarianism. You really could. You could get to that point. And the thing that would, I think, the only thing that will make it work to go back to sort of the roots of where we are and do what we need to be is you're going to have some leadership, either a person or a few people that prove to the rest of the country that this is a good way to go here. There's nothing wrong with capitalism done the right way. You know, you can't be in a situation where we can spend all this money and do all this debt. In the long run, it doesn't work. So I think in order for that to happen, and I think that's a huge question, by the way, Donald. And I think people are worried about it. It's funny you mention it because I think the average person today is like, you know what? I don't really know what's going on. I'm lost. And they're talking about, I'm not getting anything in the bank. I'm not getting anything from my bonds. I've got these crazy stocks that run up that don't make any money. I see real estate, you know, and it's a period where they're very uneasy right now, just generally uneasy, even young people. But I think it's going to take some kind of leadership in order to get back to that point. If not, you will see us just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. Every time you have something go wrong, we will throw more money at it. We'll produce a society that, you know, depends on the federal government, that sort of thing. So I'm hoping to have somebody pop up here, and I don't care what party they are. I just like to have somebody pop up that says, hey, you know what? This is a great place, but it needs to be structured like it was. You know, I understand all the things that go on with race and all that sort of thing, but I'm just saying, just on the capitalistic side and where the country was. And so that's sort of my take on it.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. On that note, Ted Oakley, we say thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure for me, and I hope for our audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Donald. Appreciate it.
Have a great day.